Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, Mr. Wilfred Yu, Deputy CEO, Co-Chief Operating Officer, Co-Head of Markets, the Hong Kong Exchange, Mr. Rico Leung, Executive Director of the Supervision of Markets Division, SFC, and Ms. Carmen Chu, Executive Director, Banking Supervision of Hong Kong Monetary Authority. The Secretary will deliver opening remarks, and then the team will present the conclusions with the aid of a PowerPoint. Good afternoon, friends of the media, Hong Kong citizens. After the Chief Executive made an announcement this morning, I'm joined by representatives from the Hong Kong Exchange, the Securities and Futures Commission, and the Hong Kong Monetary Authority at this press conference to brief you on the implementation details of severe weather trading arrangements for the securities and derivatives markets. Maintaining trading operations under severe weather conditions is a crucial step in enhancing the competitiveness of our market. The initiative is first proposed in the policy address, and the budget speech is also one of the recommendations of the Task Force on Enhancing Stock Market Liquidity, which has received overwhelming support from the industry. Based on the feedback collected through consultation by the Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing Limited, the majority of the industry, including banks and brokerage firms that account for 90% of the market turnover, support the proposed arrangements. The Chief Executive has also announced this morning that the reform will be implemented on September 23rd. We believe that now is the best time to implement the reform, and that is, we need to do it as soon as possible to demonstrate to the world the concerted efforts of the financial industry in Hong Kong in promoting the financial system updates and reforms. Today's announcement will focus on the policy direction and the complete arrangements of the reform, including its necessity, timetable, recommended operational arrangements, and measures to support small and medium-sized brokerage firms. The reform plan can be summarized as being appropriate in three ways, which means appropriate preparation time, appropriate supporting measures, and appropriate assistance. As a competitive international financial center, Hong Kong's core advantages lies in connecting local, mainland, and international investors to invest and manage risks on our trading platform. Maintaining the operation of the markets in inclement weather will allow global investors not to be affected by local weather conditions and miss trading and investment opportunities in Hong Kong. In fact, since 2018, the Hong Kong securities and derivatives markets have been closed 11 times due to severe weather conditions. Just last year, there were 4 closures, 3 of which required a full-day market closure, preventing investors from managing their investment portfolios in the Hong Kong stock market and hence exposing them to potential market risks. The episodes also restricted international and mainland investors from participating in both the mainland and Hong Kong markets through mutual market access. Looking at major markets around the world, it is a default and a common practice to maintain normal trading operations in any weather condition. As an international financial center, Hong Kong should also align its practices with international standards. In fact, electronic trading has become a major trend, and weather conditions should not be a barrier to financial transactions. In addition, the industry has become more familiar with the work-from-home arrangements and experiences due to the pandemic. There are also more technology solutions available in the market to meet the needs of remote work and business operations. Implementing this reform will sustain Hong Kong's efforts in enhancing the efficiency of its financing platform, expand various channels of mutual market access, and develop more securities and derivatives products, thereby promoting investor participation in the market. This not only helps consolidate the competitiveness of Hong Kong as an international financial center, but also further enhances its role as a two-way gateway between the international and mainland markets. Therefore, it is necessary to implement this reform as soon as possible and comprehensively, and now is the best time to do so. We've decided to implement the measures on the 23rd of September this year. The Hong Kong securities and derivatives market will operate as usual under severe weather conditions. This includes initial public offerings, northbound, southbound trading under the Stock Connect schemes, holiday trading for derivatives, and after-hours trading of all securities and derivatives. They will operate according to the original trading calendar without being affected by weather conditions, with a view to increasing the certainty of market operations. To ensure the smooth implementation of the plan, we have a comprehensive set of arrangements in place, which I mentioned earlier as the 3 appropriate measures. We will give the industry sufficient time to adapt to the new arrangements, provide appropriate technical support, and offer appropriate assistance to small and medium-sized securities firms. The first point is appropriate time frame. We will give market participants time to adapt to and understand the new requirements. From today's announcement to the implementation date on the 23rd of September, the market will have 3 months of preparation. This is determined through a comprehensive evaluation of the actual situation of stakeholders by the Hong Kong X and financial regulatory institutions. It will allow the market participants to be fully prepared. The Hong Kong X will also issue rule amendments and practical guidelines and conduct testing with market participants to closely monitor market readiness. The Securities and Futures Commission, or SFC, will also communicate with customers and specify the expected requirements for business operations, issue circulars to the market to ensure that market participants understand the relevant requirements. The second point is appropriate support. We emphasize that personal safety has always been an important consideration. Referring to the experience of working from home during the pandemic and considering the widely available technical solutions in the market, the industry should adopt remote work in severe weather conditions, and we will give appropriate support to help the industry adapt to the new arrangements. The Hong Kong Exchange will also provide technical support and guidance and help match security firms in need of purchasing remote work technology solutions with relevant suppliers. The third point is appropriate assistance. We understand that some small and medium-sized brokerage firms may require more time to prepare for full adoption of remote work due to manpower and resource implications. We have put in place corresponding arrangements, and as detailed in the consultation summary published today, if some small and medium-sized firms are unable to arrange for all employees to work remotely during the initial phase of the plan and need to assign employees to return to the workplace in inclement weather, they should follow the code of practice in times of adverse weather and extreme conditions of the Labour Department, discuss and formulate relevant plans with the employees involved. In this regard, employers should prepare according to the code, assess the minimum number of employees required, work schedules and support measures during the period, including transportation, meals, drinking water, allowances, as well as considering additional insurance coverage and complying with the relevant legal requirements. On the premise of safety, employers can discuss with the designated employees the possibility of getting back to the office outside of working hours before Typhoon Signal Number 8 or the black rainstorm warning is hoisted, provided that public transportation is available, and leave only until the severe weather conditions have subsided. Employers should engage in early discussions with the employees regarding duty arrangements, including obtaining employee consent to amend the employment contracts if necessary. In addition, to support small and medium-sized brokerage firms in preparing for the implementation, until the end of the year, if individual eligible firms are unable to fulfill settlement requirements on adverse weather trading days due to exceptional circumstances in short term, the Hong Kong Exchange will temporarily settle any outstanding payment obligations on behalf of the firms in question, and the firms will not be able to engage in trading during adverse weather conditions and will be required to promptly make up the funds afterwards. The SFC will also provide guidance on matters that the firms should pay attention to during the implementation of the arrangements to ensure normal operation and safeguard the interests of clients. Fourth point, we have a package of support measures to implement the reform. The banking sector will fully support the operational and fund settlement needs of the participants. under the coordination of the Hong Kong Association of Banks and the Hong Kong Interbank Clearing Limited. It has been confirmed that relevant banking services will operate as usual during adverse weather conditions. This includes designated banks for settlement and delivery banks providing normal electronic check clearing and electronic money transfer services. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority will also issue a circular today reminding banks to allocate sufficient resources to continue providing e-banking and transfer services and to appropriately assist the firms in implementing the recommendations. Now may I give the floor to Wilfred to elaborate on the above proposal. Mr. Yu will take the floor.
多謝局長。
Thank you, Secretary. I would also like to thank the government, the HKMA and the SFC for the support in putting in place the SWT arrangements. And in the past few months, we have been consulting the trade and stakeholders. We've collected much feedback. Let me now share with you the details about the arrangements. The first point is, as the Secretary said, SWT is very important to the financial market of Hong Kong. And most major markets would remain operational during severe weather conditions. If they cease operations, there will actually be higher uncertainty. With the prevalence of technologies, many operations are carried out electronically. So even when there is a typhoon, we consider it feasible to maintain trading. So we have made reference to practice in other regions such as the Asia market in mainland China and the Japanese and South Korean markets. They would remain operational during adverse weather. Hong Kong is a global market. We have investors from all over the world investing in the market, and if the market is to cease operations during adverse weather, it may be hard for them to understand why. We also have the mutual access schemes that would link the mainland and international markets through the Hong Kong market. So with risk management and the carrying out of transactions, if we are to cease operations during inclement weather, it may have unintended impact. So for mainland investors who cannot carry out transactions in the Hong Kong market, it can be of great concern to them. For example, also for index rebalancing days, many transactions will be carried out on those days. And if such days fall on a day when there is severe weather, there can be a significant impact. If we are to cease operations still during inclement weather, it can seriously affect our competitiveness. So we hope that with this opportunity, we can encourage market participants to make good use of technologies and upgrade their systems. I'm sure friends of the media have read the consultation paper multiple times, so you should be familiar with the relevant information. So I'll just talk about the salient points. We have received much feedback from the trade, and we have received broad support for implementing SWT in Hong Kong's markets. This is a consensus in the sector. And in fact, exchange and clearing participants that represent 90% of the turnover in the market support implementing SWT. There is indeed a small group that have their concerns, considering that it may be difficult to implement such arrangements. We do take note of such. In the conclusions, we have responded to the concerns of those who have raised such. We hope that the information that we have provided would allay their concerns. Let me talk about the implementation arrangements. So for securities and derivatives markets, starting from 23rd of September, whenever there is typhoon, rainstorm warning, or extreme conditions, operations would continue. And that would include northbound and southbound trading and derivatives markets as well as security markets. Banking and securities dealers will provide electronic services, but physical outlets will remain closed to make sure the operations are safe. We would also encourage market participants to implement remote working arrangements. We understand that during the pandemic, many market participants have implemented remote working arrangements. I do believe there has yet to be 100% coverage, but we would encourage market participants to implement such arrangements to deal with different potential scenarios that may require remote working. If under exceptional circumstances, a small number of staff is required to return to their workplaces, we would ask the brokers or market participants to follow the code of practice issued by the Labor Department. As the Secretary said, for certain small and medium-sized brokers that cannot undertake the full arrangements on 23rd of September, the HKX would provide support to them, and I will talk about the details later. Now, whenever there is a typhoon signal that is hoisted, people may be concerned when typhoon signal number 8 will be hoisted because it would affect when the market will suspend its trading. And when such signal is removed, market would resume operations and people again would have to worry about when the market will resume operations. It may be difficult for firms to handle as they have to handle various systems. This, as I said earlier, may affect the reputation of Hong Kong's market. If trading cannot be carried out in time, it may seriously affect the turnover and thus posing great risks for the stakeholders involved. So for investors or firms in future, regardless of weather conditions, the markets will open and close as usual. And as I said earlier, market participants are encouraged to implement remote working arrangements to continue providing the relevant services. But certain adjustments will be made to certain arrangements that don't impact market operations. For example, listing ceremonies will be postponed for safety concerns. These arrangements align with global best practices. Now, some more details about the arrangements. As I said earlier, remote working arrangements are commonplace in Hong Kong. Specifically, during the pandemic, we do observe that market operations were not affected. So we would encourage market participants to conduct system upgrades to implement remote working arrangements. We would also conduct testing exercises if necessary for market participants to test their connection to TMHK exit system. So we would urge employers to communicate with staff early on SWT day work arrangements and give prior notice to clients regarding service and communications arrangements. So with the typhoon signal number 8 hoisted, it's not the case that people would then leave home to go to work or leave the office. For certain security dealers, if there is a small number of staff members that would be required to go back to their workplaces, the firms should make arrangements with employees early on and prepare the necessary water or food if necessary. We would also ask the employers to refer to the Labor Department's Code of Practice to ensure proper arrangements are made.
For investors, they should also familiarize themselves with the arrangements in adverse weather conditions. For example, physical brokerage branches may not be available. If you usually trade at the physical branch, then you won't expect services to be available at such a physical branch when typhoon signal number 8 is hoisted. So in terms of funds and other trading arrangements, plans should be put in place in advance. And it's also common knowledge that investors nowadays trade through mobile platforms and online banking. They may not need to visit the physical branches. Now, as I said, the bank branches will be closed during severe weather days, but the physical checks deposited the day before will still be processed. Other banking services such as fund transfers will also be available through e-channels. That means they will not be affected by the weather conditions. So in passing, let me tell you what the SFC and the Hong Kong MA will do. They will respectively issue circulars later today to provide guidance to the brokerage firms and to assist in the operations. They will also liaise closely with the relevant industry stakeholders to ensure that operations will not be affected. Next, I'd like to go through the support arrangements for small and medium-sized brokers. Now, these are interim support measures, as the Secretary mentioned. The support measures will be good from the 23rd of September until the end of the year. So depending on the circumstances, the small and medium-sized brokers can make applications to us. They would need to tell us the following. For example, why they are not able to comply with the severe weather trading arrangements. And they will need to tell us, for example, when they will be able to do that, if not today. And they will also be required to meet certain conditions imposed by the Hong Kong Exchange. And then Hong Kong X will consider the merits of the individual applications, and then the Hong Kong X will assist in fulfilling the obligations on their behalf for the time being. Now, the supporting arrangements will be valid from the 23rd of September to the end of the year, but after the severe weather has subsided, these firms will be required to make up for the funds paid by the Hong Kong X as soon as possible. For the participating small and medium-sized brokers, That means they are not able to, say, fulfill margin payments and other delivery obligations on the day in question. And that means they will be subject to certain restrictions, such as the positions trading. So more details will be disclosed in due course in relation to the support arrangements. Last point, implementation timeline. We announced the consultation outcomes and the arrangements today, and in due course we will announce the details of support arrangements for small and medium-sized brokers. And from early July to August, we're going to perform some tests and drills for the firms to be able to connect to the system remotely to maintain normal operations. And then on the 23rd of September, we will officially implement SWT. That means in the future, regardless of weather conditions, there will not be any suspension of market trading in Hong Kong. Right, the floor is now open. If you have questions, please tell us which media outlet you represent. This reporter in green. I'm Scarlett from Phoenix TV. I have a question for Mr. Yu. You mentioned towards the end of the presentation that between July and August, tests will be conducted to check out the market readiness. Well, there are different kinds of firms in Hong Kong with a great variety of products. Now, how can you ensure that deducting the public holidays with just 20 days or so, these participants will be ready for SWT arrangements? Thank you. Let me respond by citing a number of important points. In fact, first and foremost, we have maintained normal trading for a very long period of time. So for the brokerage firms, they had the experience during the pandemic and they have been able to maintain operations remotely. And yet, of course, we understand there is a need for them to further adapt to the new arrangements. Second, in terms of market interest, it is necessary that Hong Kong takes this step. Now, as I mentioned, we will launch this arrangement on the 23rd of September. So before that, we need to provide an opportunity for the market to test it out to see if the system works. And I think that there is sufficient time, and we're talking about several months, for the market to get ready for the new arrangements. The third point is this. The Hong Kong market is vibrant and market participants are very supportive of market development in the sense of, say, upgrading their systems. And meanwhile, as you know, the global trend is to go paperless. So I think this will be a very good incentive for us to move towards digitization. Next, this reporter in green. I'm Enoch from SEMP. I have a number of questions. First, supporting arrangements for the small and medium-sized brokers as an interim arrangements, do you think that many firms will participate under this special measure? And what do you expect to involve a great amount? Now, the arrangements will come to an end towards the end of the year. That means they will have to upgrade their systems by then. What if the firms are unable to do that? What if something goes wrong? Can you tell us exactly what support will be given to these small and medium-sized firms? Now, in the consultation outcome, it is said that you have garnered 90% support. What about the minority? What are the concerns of the small and medium-sized firms? Another question on the banking sector is a technical one. You talked about settling e-checks and physical checks, only that bank branches will be closed. Can you tell us more about checks?
回答啦。
Well, you asked many questions. I'll try to answer them one by one. For brokers, the support arrangements should be regarded as support for small and medium-sized brokers in the interim, because we understand they may face difficulties due to manpower and resource constraints. It would allow time for them to put in place some arrangements. So for remote working arrangements and systems, I'm sure many of you have used some form of that. And we would say the operations are quite mature. We have very advanced technologies now. We believe the issues can be resolved. So we hope that the trade can upgrade their services and systems to iron out any potential issues. I believe with the use of technologies, many issues can be resolved. And if remote working arrangements are put in place, these issues should not happen. I'll now let Ms. Carmen Chu answer the other questions. Thank you. For severe weather conditions, if checks are already deposited the day before, banks will collect and handle the checks that were deposited the day before the severe weather trading day. But as other colleagues said, with the development of the market and advances in technologies, we can have ear clearing of checks. And during adverse weather, banks can continue to provide e-check clearing as well as electronic fund transfer services. And we will issue a circular today to ensure banks will allocate resources to continue to provide such services. And we will encourage them to communicate with their clients as well as brokers about the work needed to be done or the arrangements to be put in place for SWT. Thank you. The next journalist, please. Hi, I'm from Commercial Daily. Right now, you are saying operations would be as usual in adverse weather conditions. Do you expect any differences in trading? Do you expect less trade during adverse weather conditions? You said in August market tests will be conducted. If any issues are identified, would that delay the implementation of SWT on 23rd of September? Do you expect such possibilities, or is the date set in stone? I also observed that there would be support provided to small and medium-sized brokers. Would such brokers have to register with HKX in advance in order to be eligible for such support? Would you also set a limit for the number of brokers that can be supported and the fulfillment of margin payment? Well, I'll perhaps first answer some of the questions. As you may know, the chief executive talked about this during the press conference earlier today, and it was said that the date was set with reference to feedback from stakeholders. If small and medium-sized brokers cannot implement the arrangements, within the 3 months after implementation, we would provide some support to prop them up, but we do not see any need to postpone the implementation date of SWT. Thank you. I think with the question about trading volume during inclement weather, I do not have a crystal ball, but referring to the experience in other markets, it would just be like any other trading day. If we look at the mainland Asia market, we do not see the weather conditions affecting the trade. So I'm quite confident that on those days, trading would just be like any other days. As for support arrangements for small and medium-sized brokers, we would require brokers to apply to us in advance. They would need to give reasons why they cannot implement such arrangements in time and when they will be able to implement such arrangements. It's hard to say how many would need such support at the moment, but I think in general the trade has a consensus that with the use of technologies, the issues can be resolved. Thank you. Next question, please. Thank you. I'm KK from Singtel. I want to ask, 23rd of September would be near the end of typhoon season. Would it be too late for the implementation of SWT? And you said 10%, well, brokerage firms accounting for 10% of the market turnover would object to the SWT arrangements. How many would that be and why exactly? Thank you. Well, I think we can't say for sure September would be near the end of typhoon season because we did see typhoons happening in November before. We consider the date 23rd of September to be appropriate, all in all. I'm not saying that brokerage firms accounting for 10% of the market turnover object to SWT arrangements. I talked about brokerage firms accounting for 90% of market turnover supporting the arrangements. The rest would have some questions or reservations only. I'll let the Secretary supplement my answers. Thank you. Well, we do see adverse weather events being quite sparse, but then we are getting more frequently such events. We have 4 such events requiring market suspension in the last year, so we should be prepared. We do understand that there would be different circumstances faced by different brokers, so we have set a relatively late date for implementation in September, and we would provide support arrangements within the 3 months after implementation. We believe these would be comprehensive measures, and we have already considered the relevant brokerage firms that would need time to put in place the relevant arrangements. Thank you. The man in striped shirt. Thank you. I'm from HKET. So during the transitional period, for those brokers that would require support, you said trading restrictions would be put in place for them. What kind of restrictions would that be? I also want to ask about for inclement weather conditions. We had some unprecedented rainfall events last year. What do you think in future would warrant suspension of the market? How extreme would the weather conditions have to be?
Let me take your second question. You asked about extreme conditions. That means adverse weather conditions. Now, as I said just now, around the world, be it the black rainstorm warning or typhoons, global markets would usually maintain normal operations. But we also need to have regard to force majeure. There are factors beyond our control. Now, say in an extreme scenario, there may be a wide or extensive power outage, and inevitably, suspension will take place. So definitely, we will need to consider the exceptional circumstances. Secretary can supplement. Right, as Wilfred just now put it, the current practice is that the market operations are tied to the hoisting of typhoon and rainstorm warning signals. Now, with the SWT arrangements in place, market trading will continue as usual. But you also mentioned some very extreme conditions. And in such an event, the government may need to step in and introduce some special measures. But after all, we are talking about some very extreme scenarios. And this is a safety net for us, so to speak. In general, for tropical cyclone signals or black rainstorm warning, etc., we will introduce the SWT arrangements to maintain market trading. Now, let me also answer your question on support arrangements for small and medium-sized brokers. Say if the brokers have signed up for the supporting arrangements, and if on the day in question the brokers are unable to close the position, that means if they're unable to make the margin payment, then trading restrictions will apply. So brokers are encouraged to communicate with their investors and clients so as to give full regard to the interest of investors.
Okay, so first of all, over the arrangement, the newly implemented arrangements, like some industry members, they have raised concerns over the city's infrastructure, especially in some new territories area, whereas there's only sole electricity or network providers. So what are the contingency plans if power or telecom outages happens in those areas? And secondly, for the support for the small and medium-sized brokers, while you mentioned that it's hard to give an estimate of how many would require such arrangements, could you talk about do you believe all of them can adopt the remote working arrangement by the end of this year, or what are the most challenging or difficulties they face? And last of all, could you talk about like you mentioned, currently the arrangement is only implemented during black rainstorm and typhoon signal number 8 or above. Would you consider the situation when there are other serious weather conditions, like perhaps flooding or landslides, or maybe serious public transport interruptions? So will be some sort of special arrangements for those scenarios? Thank you.
I'll take the questions first, and my colleagues can supplement if needed. In fact, for your question number 1 and 3, I would say the risks that you mentioned are not something that are new to us. Because for whatever city or whatever financial center, definitely there could be the potential or the possibility of some having very serious conditions in terms of potentially power outage or whatever. So already, currently, even without this severe weather arrangement, there are already sufficient contingency arrangements through our regulators and our financial market infrastructure to deal with that. So it's not really something related or something incremental to what we are proposing here. That's number 1. And number 2, in terms of your question regarding the readiness of the small or relatively medium-sized brokers in the scheme, as I've set out at the outset, basically in formulating this overall timetable in terms of implementing it in end September, and also at the same time having the overall scheme launch, and also at the same time allow a 3 months period for the potential participants who cannot really upgrade their system within the first 3 months to have certain leeway before the end of this year. We have already taken into account of their possibility of so doing, because as highlighted by Wilfred just now, after all, working from home or using technology or online, whatever systems available to do all the arrangement is not something new to the market. And especially during COVID times, when already certain members of our financial community are already doing that. So what we are proposing here is not a drastic change, but rather incremental change, which is contingent on experience that we gathered before. That's number one. And number two, in order to enable those participants to be able to upgrade themselves, technically, we have the solutions ready in the market. And the exchange has already set out in the consultation document conclusions that they will provide the necessary support in order to connect the potential service providers to the participants if they are needed. That's number one. And number two, incentives are being given to the participants to upgrade themselves. Because for those that cannot do that before end September, if they need more time, we, the exchange, will support them through shouldering the relevant clearing responsibilities. At the same time, the regulators will pragmatically deal with their relevant compliance issues if they cannot, during that period, move everything online. So I would say what we are proposing here is a holistic package, at the same time taking into account the practical readiness of the participants.
我哋答多兩題啊。
Let's take 2 more questions. This lady in grey. From Oriental Daily. There are 3 questions. First, a question for Chris, the secretary. It's usually the Hong Kong exchange that would make announcements in relation to details of market arrangements, but it seems that through and through the government has taken the lead in the discussion and the consultation of this new arrangement. Does it mean a change in stance, that there will be a departure from the principle of a small government and big market? The other question is for Wilfred from Hong Kong Exchange. It is said that in July and August, market testing will be conducted. Now, how many tests will be conducted to ensure that the operation of the arrangements will be smooth? If something goes wrong by then, will there be a plan B? Last is a question for the SFC. There are concerns from the firms that in the initial phase there may be hiccups. Will the SFC take a more lenient approach in the initial period? I'll take the first 2 questions and then the SFC can take the third question. First of all, the Chief Executive announced the implementation date this morning, and he explained the purpose of this arrangement is for the purpose of enhancing our competitiveness as an international financial center and keeping abreast with international developments. And that is how we effectively integrate the government with the capable government with an effective market. The reform is timely, and more importantly, we need to consider how important this policy is and the implications. Second point. Now, the arrangement involves not only the Hong Kong Exchange. Now, although the Hong Kong Exchange has made a lot of efforts in tapping the views of the stakeholders. But in order to make it happen, we also need the involvement of different parties such as the SFC as well as the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, which supervises the banking sector. So this arrangement comes with a basket of measures with the support of different financial regulators. and it is the government's responsibility to coordinate among the different parties. Right, to take the second question about how many tests will have to be conducted and whether there is a plan B if something goes wrong. I think what is important is that during the drills, the participants should familiarize themselves with the operations. Now, the situation for each firm may be different, but our approach to all the firms is the same. So as long as you've decided to adopt the arrangements, you will need to rationalize your internal operations in terms of assignment of staff, login arrangements to the systems, and connection to the Hong Kong exchanges system, etc. I think this is the crux of the drills. It's not just about the number of tests to be conducted. It's not a new feature that the participants would like to try out, and that we need to take more tests.
I'll let Rico answer the question about SFC. As Wilfred said earlier, later today, SFC will issue circulars to the relevant stakeholders. And in the circulars, we would say that HKX during the consultations have received feedback from the trade, and we will talk about our views in the circulars. With SWT arrangements, some brokerage firms or individuals may fail to meet the requirements right away. I can't say what stance we're going to take at this stage, but we will try to, as much as possible, adopt a flexible approach. Thank you. The last question. Thank you. I'm Curtis from Mingpao. I have 3 questions. Regarding the implementation date, 3 months after that, there will be support arrangements for small and medium-sized brokers. Is it the case that with putting in place such support arrangements, you would expect these brokers or some brokers to not be ready by September? So why not delay the implementation to next year? And I understand that HKX may not allow certain applications for support arrangements. Would you consider the circumstances of the broker specifically in relation to the fulfillment of margin payment and so on? My third question is a bit more technical regarding e-check clearing. Is it the case that, say, with the example in the consultation paper, so for Wednesday and Thursdays, they are both severe weather trading days, would the check only take effect on the Monday of the following week? Thank you. I'll answer the first question, and then I'll let the HKMA colleague answer the question about check clearing. With the timetable, we have considered the time that would be needed for the participants to put in place the relevant arrangements. For those that are already quite prepared, we think 3 months would be more than enough. And as I said earlier, brokerage firms accounting for 90% of the market turnover support the arrangements, and most of them already have such arrangements in place. And as the SFC colleague said, there may be different circumstances surrounding each broker. So we have put in place a transitional period of 3 months for some brokers to conduct system upgrades and would be entitled to support arrangements if they are eligible. But then with the electronic settlement arrangements, we would encourage them to conduct the relevant upgrades to continue to provide such services. Thank you. Well, I think you're talking about physical checks, not e-checks, right? Correct. So the principle is for severe weather trading days, if checks are deposited the day before, I'm talking about physical checks. So on severe weather trading day, banks would continue to operate such services, and HKICL has a system to handle and clear the checks, the physical checks. But if there are 2 consecutive severe weather trading days, the first severe weather trading day, banks will be closed. So no physical checks will be collected by banks. So what you mentioned should not happen. The speaker's microphone is not on. Is it the case that checks for security transaction would have such arrangement, or is it for all checks? Thank you. With the banks collecting such checks, they do not know what the checks are used for. So this arrangement for banks would be a general application. So on severe weather trading days, banks will be closed, but then they will collect physical checks deposited the day before. Thank you. Thank you. This is the end of the press conference. Thank you.